Well, Dazza, thank you very much for arranging this. We apologize for the delays. I'm sure you were probably listening. It got pretty spirited. Really good discussion, by the way, committee. I think that's the kind of stuff that makes this committee enjoyable. But we really appreciate, Dazza, all the work you put in for this. Kind of the 30-second background is that obviously AI is the buzzword. We all hear it a dozen times a day. But Dazza has been really helpful to this committee in kind of helping us work through the thought experiment of how do we regulate this. Like again, we want to make sure we don't go overboard in either direction with anything, and certainly AI being so as topical as it is, it's something we've talked about a lot. Des has very generously teed up some folks who have a lot of experience in AI, whether it's in the technical aspect, the legal and the regulatory. And so, Des, I don't want to steal too much of your thunder. So why don't you take it away and kind of lay a bit of the groundwork in this demo and some of the context around it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Dazza Greenwood. I run law.mit.edu, and I'm also a researcher at Stanford Law School and run civics.com, a legal tech consultancy. And in all of those endeavors, my focus is using technology for legal tasks and processes, what we call computational law. And only in the last 2 or 3 years have we really been able to achieve this goal because of the capabilities of the new generation of AI. I'm talking about large language models. And I believe that today, what the co-chairs have requested is a deeper dive into one aspect of generative AI, which may be the aspect that most catalyzes a potential need for some legal reforms. And that's because it extends the capabilities of generative AI and of AI systems in ways that increase what it can do and the impacts it can have. And there are tremendous benefits for this and some risks as well. I'm talking about agentic AI, or using generative AI as an agent that can perform a task or some sort of workflow on behalf of a user with potentially very little or no oversight or approval before it's done with that workflow. And so what I've done today is put together a couple of people who are deep into this type of technology, people who I respect and who I go to find out more about what the state of the art is. And they're prepared to provide an overview of agentic AI in particular, as it relates to algorithmic decision making and the sort of frontier of this technology and what's happening in the market. And I will provide some synthesizing remarks when they're done. First up is Alex Riebman, who is CEO of Agent Ops, and who has taught me a great deal about the cutting edge of agentic technology, and who's going to provide an overview and also some more information about what's happening in the industry right now, like who's using this technology for what. And then Campbell Hutchinson and team is going to show a live demo of a great application of this technology that is in the legal context. I was able to see this demo 2 weekends ago at Stanford Law Hackathon, and it basically demonstrates a regulatory process. I'll leave it at that. I'm terribly sorry that some of the people who I put together to testify the last time you asked me to put a panel together aren't able to make it today due to just conflicts in schedule. But luckily, as time runs short, this will take less time, and I think that the speakers we have are directly on point. So with that, with Chairman's permission, perhaps we can allow Alex to speak next.
Thank you, Dazza. Yeah, Mr. Riebman, we really appreciate you making this effort and setting aside this time to come and chat with us and share your knowledge. Just for committee protocol, just introduce yourself, who you're with, maybe give us a little bit of background info about yourself, and please proceed.
Thank you very much. Thanks again to Daza and the committee for having me on. My name is Alex Riedman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Agency AI. We're most well known for building a tool called Agent Ops. So Agent Ops is our primary product offering, and it's what we're most well known for in the community. So about myself, I've spent the past 8 years working as a machine learning engineer, mostly building MLOps pipelines for very large organizations, including financial institutions and cybersecurity companies. Agent Ops is a recently funded venture. We announced our fundraising about a month ago. We've been operating for about a year, and we're headquartered in San Francisco.
Excellent. Please proceed.
Yeah, happy to. And for illustrative purposes, we'll be showing off a little slide deck, and we'll kind of show off some cool demos and a high-level view of what agentic AI is capable of. So, okay, beautiful. Is my screen visible? I think it should be.
Yep,
Okay,
we
awesome.
gotcha. We're tracking.
Perfect. So just a little bit about myself. So again, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Agency, also known as Agent Ops. We are essentially we're building a future infrastructure for agentic AI. So agentic AI is this idea where you basically can give high-level instructions to programs and they figure out how to solve problems on their own. Whereas in the past, we normally had to code these things ourselves. So I previously, again, I mentioned earlier before, but I worked as a consultant, did a lot of work for large financial institutions, also worked in their almost cybersecurity, building machine learning-based antiviruses. And we recently announced our fundraise a couple of weeks ago, although we're about a year old at this point. So what we're doing, and this is kind of the most technical slide, and I'll go into some cooler examples in a little bit. Agent Ops is a core dependency in the AI agent software development lifecycle. So we help developers everywhere from the prototype to the productions phase, both brainstorm, architect agents, find solutions for different problems. We offer consultancy as well as develop the developer tools that make it easy to take ideas to market. So right now, a big challenge with AI agents is that they're very slow, they're very expensive and unreliable, and we built tools to help build a curated evaluation cycle that make it so that these software programs, which have very ambitious potential, actually function in the real world. And the way that we do it is we have a software library called Agent Ops, and it's a 2 line of code integration. We work with most of the major frameworks. Some you may not have heard of, but it's very simple. It's just kind of like a plug-in to existing agentic software. And what we give is basically kind of an auditing dashboard that lets you see making sure that your agents are under control, that they're operating as expected, that they're within cost thresholds, and you're able to monitor so that they're compliant with your organization standards as well as any regulations. So that begs the question, though, what is an AI agent? So the easiest way I use to describe it is that at least here in San Francisco, and at least maybe you've seen on YouTube or on social media, that we have kind of actually self-driving cars. And the idea here is you give them instructions. I want you to go from A to B, right? So figure out how to navigate to this location. And an AI agent is like a self-driving program. And so you actually give it as you give an instruction, like, order me a pizza. So I don't know if any members of the community have used ChatGPT before. ChatGPT is this really wonderful technology that can answer questions. It can read poetry. It's extremely knowledgeable, but that's what it's fundamentally limited to: asking and answering questions, or answering questions. An AI agent is actually something that can change the world state in some degree. So you can actually say, "Hey, order me a pizza," and it will take a credit card. It will get a phone. It will get an email, and it'll actually place that order for you. It will call a representative, and it's all a program that's doing that. There's no humans in the loop whatsoever. And that's really kind of the power here. You have these self-driving programs that we're able to program ourselves. And what's happening is this is all kind of stemming from this boom in large language models. So OpenAI released ChatGPT in November 2022, and since then there have been a number of projects that picked up early 2023 that really build upon this technology. So a few very large ones are one known as AutoGPT, which was essentially a project where a developer had prompted ChatGPT to keep improving itself to the point where it became nearly fully autonomous. So instead of having a human in the loop constantly guiding and instructing it, it would actually build its own software. And at that point, it became one of the most popular projects on GitHub. GitHub, for those not super aware, is one of the most popular, actually the most popular open source software community on the web where people share projects, they work on community efforts, products, so on and so forth. So 80,000 stars is it's probably one of the most popular projects of all time. And same thing goes for a number of other projects from Microsoft. A company called Reworked created one called Agent GPT, and a famous investor named Yohei Nakajima created an AI agent called Baby AGI. They all function with a similar premise, which is you essentially have software that learns how to build itself. So what exactly does that look like? And it's really kind of hard to explain without showing off a few examples at the very least. So a very, very cool example is one called Voyager. And Voyager is an AI agent that was built upon the video game Minecraft. So I don't know if anyone's tried this game before, if you have kids that play this game, but essentially it's an open world sandbox game where you can actually, you as a player can interact, you can collect blocks, you can fight enemies, you can build castles, so on and so forth. And a team of researchers at NVIDIA, Caltech, UT Austin, Stanford, and ASU, they all came together to actually build an AI agent. Instead of a human playing the game, an agent could play the game. And the way that would work, and this again, if it's a little technical, I'll try to keep it slow, is you can instruct this agent to complete an objective. And you could say, chop down a tree or create a crafting table or fight a zombie. And what the agent does is it learns how to do that by writing its own code. So there's a scripting language that interfaces with Minecraft. The agent would write that code, and if the code was operational, it would save that code to a skill library. So the next time that it encounters, let's say, a zombie or a tree to chop down, and you give it the instructions, it can learn that skill that's already written down from that skill library and solve the problem. And what that looks like actually tangibly is here's a little video showing off an AI agent playing Minecraft. So you give the high level instruction to swim or catch a fish. And so what you're seeing right now is the agent actually playing the game. There are no humans involved whatsoever. And so you give it the high level instruction to hunt down a pig, and it's figure out how to do this on its own. And it's all because of code that it's learned to write for itself. The way that this model was trained was by watching thousands of examples on YouTube, but also it's due to the advancements in GPT-4 that it's actually able to write its own code and operate in this way. So these are all enabled by advancements in large language models, which is really surprising and extremely powerful. We're at the very, very beginning, and this is just one example. So for added context, some use cases that we've been seeing a lot of, especially we work with a lot of enterprise users, is 4 different kind of domains. So the first domain is the AI copilots, and you can kind of think of these as the chat GPTs of the world. So these are things from answering questions to chatting with your data. So a lot of people in this room, I'm assuming, work in law, and maybe you want to do a draft of a bill. You can actually upload your bill to ChatGPT and say, are there any issues? Are there any problems? Are there any conflicts in this bill that are worth considering? And imagine an enterprise, it's not just public bills, it's actually private documents. Sometimes it's healthcare data. Sometimes it's a variety of different data sets that you don't want going to a third-party provider. So AI copilots, though, actually offer an enormous potential. We see a lot of adoption with those. The second major vertical we've been seeing is the agentic chatbots. So we're all familiar with this really horrible user experience where suppose you want to file a refund or change your flight ticket or something like this, and you're chatting with a chatbot, maybe a bot or maybe a human. Either way, it's not so great. But what we're seeing is kind of an emergence of AI agent chatbots that are able to instantly, iteratively decide how to solve problems. So it can refund tickets. There's a company called Klarna, which is a Swedish company. They do buy now, pay later solutions. They replaced 90% of their human support staff with AI chatbots powered by GPT. And it's bagging them about $40 million a year in profit. It's an extremely high product market fit product that they built out. On the more nerdy side of things, we do see a lot of developer tools. So there's a really interesting tool called Cursor. Cursor is an AI code editor. You give it a high-level instruction, it can actually write entire applications for you automatically, which is really interesting. Another one that came out recently is called Devin. Essentially, you just give it a high-level instruction, you give it product requirements. It can make websites, can make mobile apps, iPhone, iOS, all with one line of English, right? And it just figures out all its own how to write its own code and make software, which is really excellent and surprising. Lastly, we've seen this a lot more, and this is the last vertical before I'll kind of wrap things up, is autonomous agents. And this is where we're seeing a lot of very, very valuable use cases appear. So autonomous agents are things like, think about instead of hiring an intern or a virtual assistant, you're actually going to hire an AI assistant. And these AI assistants can do everything from scheduling, even scheduling appointments for you, talking to your doctor, speaking to customer support. They can do contract negotiation. I saw an AI agent this weekend that would go to Facebook Marketplace and then negotiate with users on how to get the cheapest price. So he was trying, this friend of mine who built this agent was trying to buy a beanbag chair on Marketplace. And he sent an AI agent to Marketplace to negotiate, and he got $50 off of this beanbag chair. So you can just imagine, like, you give a high level instruction to these agents, and they'll do your job for you. So instead of hiring humans, we might be hiring AI agents in the future. So lastly, just kind of talking about the stack, just thinking about what AI agents are capable of. The reason that AI agents are interesting is that they're all powered fundamentally by large language models. Large language models are by and large created by large providers like OpenAI, Mistral, and Anthropic. They have hundreds of millions of dollars to train these models, but they become extremely powerful, and they're very good at answering questions. Now, when they actually become powerful, then we outfit them with tools and functions. And kind of like an interesting analogy here is that what separates humans from other animals that are intelligent, like orcas and dolphins are intelligent, is that humans actually know how to create and use tools. And so do AI agents. And so in this way, instead of just like being intelligent question answer machines, they can actually change the world state in some meaningful way. They can send emails, they can make phone calls, they can update databases. And with those in mind, you can actually create extremely powerful programs in a very short amount of time. And that's what's very, very exciting about this field. A lot of the other stuff that's coming into play here, we're seeing a lot of software companies working on all parts of the stack here. So this is kind of like the AI agent stack. So we're seeing a lot of companies working on vector databases, which are specialized databases for creating memory for AI agents. So essentially, I can tell an agent that I have an allergy, or maybe I have a certain diet, and the next time it interacts with me, it will know that about me. So instead of having to go in blind every single time, it has an understanding of who I am as a person or the context of the business. Another thing that we're seeing a lot of is multi-agent tendency, which is instead of just having one single agent, you actually have multiple agents that work together. And this is actually where it becomes a little futuristic, which is I might have a scheduling agent, but I might also have a product manager agent. And the scheduling agent works with the product management agent to basically coordinate a calendar for me on my behalf. And it's a very exciting, very powerful stuff that's coming out of this thing. So just to close things off, I'll show up a very interesting demo that we've built. So you can do this for a lot of different applications. A lot of right now is not very no code. It's very code heavy. So I apologize if I'm showing a little too much code for the time being. But let me go ahead and show off a little terminal. So here's an AI agent. It does a stock analysis for us. So we're going to just pick a stock. I'm going to run the Python program, Python main.py. And what it's going to do is going to input us and say, hey, please give us a stock, and we will try to do some research. And by we, I mean the AI agents. So right now, I'm going to say, what company do you want to analyze? I will say Google, just for the sake of having Google be analyzed. What Agent Ops is doing behind the scenes, by the way, is we're offering kind of an analytics dashboard that enables you to see in real time what's going on with the agents. So right now, the agents are actually, they're working together. So I'm going to just real quick show you what the agents I've created are. Excuse me. Okay. So again, I understand it's a lot of code, but I will try to simplify it as much as possible. So let's close this guy. So I've created a crew of agents. So essentially what I've created here is, sorry, a research analyst. Financial analyst. And the financial analyst job, and it's in plain English, is to impress all customers with their financial data and market trends analysis. It has a backstory, and more importantly, it has tools. So I've actually given it access to SEC tools, so it can read and search for 10Qs. It can read and search for 10Ks. It also has a calculator, so it can actually do math on the operations that it does. I've also created another research analyst who also has access to Yahoo Finance. It has access to the SEC. It also has the ability to browse the web. So this agent's able to search the web and find information about news and understanding where the stock currently is, not just based on point-in-time data, but what the trends are. And then I've also created an investment advisor. And so the investment advisor, its job is to basically collect all the information from the other analysts and make a recommendation for us. So I'm going to go back to this terminal. Again, this is a lot of text, but this is what developers are currently dealing with. It's very, very early, very, very prototypey phase. But we can actually scroll through and see exactly what the agents are doing. So we can see that the first agent is creating a comprehensive report on Google and other recent news articles. So what it's done is it's searched for Google recent news. We can see that it's created a list of Google Chrome deadline. You have 17 hours to update your browser. Google search tests recent post carousel. Oh, very interesting. Maybe that will affect the projections. From ChatGPT to Gemini, how AI is rewriting the internet. So basically a review of Google's AI product offerings. And so what the AI agents right now are doing is they're reading all this information from the web and they're trying to form an opinion with each other. Again, the amount of code I've written to create this the simulation is very, very minimal. All the agents are doing the hard work here. And what I can actually do is monitor and observe them in our dashboard. So Agent Ops, again, is a software tool that makes it very, very simple to monitor these things. I can see how much they're spending on OpenAI credits, which is I'm using, the amount of tokens I'm consuming, and whether they produce any errors, which is very valuable for compliance teams. I get a kind of a nice view of how many tools they're using. I get a chat viewer that lets me see exactly what the agents are doing at a point in time. And more importantly, we also have like kind of a session replay diagram that shows us step by step how the agents are reasoning through problems. So I can see, for example, here, I had a GPT-4 call that cost us about half a penny. I can see the prompt and the completion. I can see certain metadata. I can also see tools. So for example, this orange bar here shows me that we were searching for Yahoo Finance on Google. So with that said, the AI agents are eventually going to come to a summary about what the stock recommendation is, whether I should buy or sell Google. And just this point to close off is, you can basically give high-level instructions to these programs in plain English, and they will just do the work for you. And this is really the magic of these things, these self-driving programs that we're launching. And in this future, let's say it came up with the investment thesis, and it says, it has created a report somewhere. I will spare you the report. Conclusion: prevents a compelling investment opportunity with strong financial health. All right, so not financial advice. These were AI agents that gave this to us. But you can essentially imagine several other use cases. I've seen it used for making phone calls. People have built entirely customer support agent teams. We've seen people do research. We've seen people build entire companies with only a couple people, and the rest of them are AI agents. So this is really the future we're planning. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that is my spiel. Thank you very much to everyone listening.
Alex, thank you very much for that demo. I mean, it just every single time I get one of these things, it just, if your objective was to turn my brain into scrambled eggs, by God, you succeeded. So I really do appreciate that. Alex, kind of the process is first we let the our committee members see if they have any questions or comments. So I want to turn it over to the committee. Is there any questions? Representative Yin, please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think agentic AI is, and Mr. Redmond, thank you for the demo. I think agentic AI is definitely one of the things that people both are amazed with and are worried about at the same time. I'm curious on what your thoughts of the risks are. So thinking about the chatbot example, if a company gives a chatbot agency to give value to customers, right? Like give ticket refunds or whatever, is there social engineering risk? Like, of course, there's social engineering risk with the human being on the other side, but with the chatbot, is there increased risk in that situation?
Mr. Reedman, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The answer is absolutely yes, and you're very forward-thinking for thinking about this, because I think it's a very common problem actually that people run into industry. And so what's actually really great about just the AI agent space in general is people are security-minded first when they're developing the AI agents. So there's actually a lot of companies that we've seen and also we partner with. We were partnered with a company that does LLM prompt detection, which can basically identify when a user is trying to jailbreak, so to speak, the model in a way that can manipulate it. So for example, filing a refund or getting a discount on something that's not deserved is probably a very common use case for these customer support chatbots. So building these guardrails into the models or into the agentic systems themselves is a #1 priority for agent builders in general. So a lot of these are actually, there's 2 layers. So there's actually the LLM layer. So the LLM layer, which is OpenAI, the Anthropics of the world, the people training the model are building safety in first, but also the people are building additional guardrails on top of that, because social engineering is a very serious risk here. The way that we're seeing agent developers do this is they're creating 2 systems, like a very tightly controlled system where the states that are possible are very tightly monitored by the systems themselves. So they use agent ops, for example, to monitor when an agent is doing something that it shouldn't be doing. But second is introducing humans in the loop. So for example, if you buy a very expensive item and you want to get a refund on that, the AI agent will help guide you through that process. But at the end of the loop, you're actually going to have a human click the button and say, yes, I approve of this. So humans are actually, I would not say that agents are going to replace humans anytime soon. Far from it. In fact, we're becoming a little more like centaurs. So centaurs are like, you can have like half man, half horse in Greek mythology. You got to think of as the horse or more like a cyborg, right? We're going to be empowered by these machines to help us make decisions faster rather than all humans doing all the grunt work.
Rep Savian, follow up? Committee members, any other questions? I think I've got a couple, but want to make sure everyone gets a bite at the apple. Ms. Co-Chairman, please go ahead.
Thank you. So, Mr. Reedman, one thing which is amazing about this is everything you just showed. We're still in the early days of this endeavor in terms of high functioning LLMs and then building additional capacity on top of that. What do you see ahead of us in the next couple of years? First of all, in a broad sense, but in a secondary sense, as legislators that we might want to be really trying to get ahead of potentially. This is something we talk with Daz a lot about, but do you have anything in mind where we want to start thinking about something because of the direction this is going to be going in the next few years?
Mr. Reedman, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. So I have opinions on a technological standpoint, but actually I think my biggest concern is from an educational standpoint. So one of my favorite college professors recently moved to a new department and is teaching a course to business students on how to use ChatGPT. And what was shocking to me, or at least to him, was very few students actually knew how to use these tools in general. And the ones who were becoming A+ students, not just in his class, but every other class they were taking, because it really just confers on a massive educational advantage. I also have an aunt who is a school teacher who has noticed something very similar, which is students are able to learn a lot faster by utilizing these tools and just knowing what's out there. So I think it's part of it is just, knowing how to teach people to use these things in general is what makes them most productive. Secondarily, so I think that, does tie into what you might want to consider from just, how from a regulator's perspective. But I'd say, from more kind of like a technology and an interesting technology perspective is there's been a lot of regulation in California, for example, trying to put the hamper on large language model producers, saying that they need to be under tighter scrutiny, they need to be a lot of legal fees and so on and so forth just to train models. What we're actually seeing now is model training is moving from a lot of the big players to becoming more democratized. So instead of seeing a world where only OpenAI is the one who's able to afford to train ChatGPT, you might be able to see somebody train ChatGPT in their garage within maybe 5 years or sooner. So there's been a lot of push towards over-regulating and basically giving a lot of advantage, conferring advantage to incumbents who have a lot of money, a lot of lawyers, rather than you have a lot of homebrew projects. So a very cool homebrew project we've seen is called News Research. They're building off of Facebook's Llama models, the basic fine-tuning them. They're fine-tuning on top of Mistral, which is another open source provider. So basically giving the ability to, or just enabling people to build out their own models and break free from a lot of big tech, which is really trying to dominate the space right now, is a huge way that we've been thinking about it. And in fact, with Agent Ops, we see a lot of users who are very concerned about privacy, especially when they're working with private data like healthcare data, and they don't want to be sending their data to OpenAI. So making sure that people are able to get democratic access to this technology is a big thing that we've been thinking about.
Ms. Co-Chairman, please go ahead.
Thank you. And you mentioned guardrails and you mentioned overregulation. It seems like those two things go a little bit hand in hand because we're seeing the regulation leading to guardrails that in some ways decrease the efficacy of the large language models and lead to information that isn't necessarily the best information, but it's the most well sanitized information perhaps for the answer. Do you see any methodology through agentic AI of maybe finding some type of middle ground where you could have a language models that are trained, we'll say, a little bit more purely, but then perhaps having a second agent as an appropriate filter that one of the larger companies might want to employ, but maybe other individuals wouldn't want to employ? Is this something that might offer us a workaround from the challenges that I think many have right now of getting clear, direct information or best answer out of an LLM?
Mr. Reedman, please go ahead.
Yes, that's an excellent question. In fact, this is kind of the line of thinking that a lot of the AI researchers are actually employing in their day-to-day workflow, which is instead of creating kind of like a Socrates agent that's really good at everything, but you kind of have to tamper it to make sure that it behaves in a certain way. What if you have kind of like a bunch of small agents that work together to create decision-making processes? And that's what we're actually seeing with a lot of these frameworks, which you have multiple agents work together that are basically specialists. So one specialist agent might just be for censorship, right? So making sure that toxic content doesn't reach the users, or malicious content or malicious code isn't produced by a code writer agent. Whereas the code writer agent might just be kind of pure in intention in terms of it's fine-tuned, it's specified and trained specifically on a certain task. So data extraction is a very big one. We see a lot of companies that are extracting data from PDFs. We don't really care that this agent knows how to recite the Gettysburg Address. All we care about is that it knows how to extract data from PDFs. But you might have a secondary agent that's just like a proofreader, and that's specialized in proofreading these things. So it's a very excellent thing. I'd say that kind of as a conclusion point, though, is that it's very subject to experimentation right now. And we're seeing a lot of, it's all driven by evaluations and benchmarks. So knowing exactly how these models are going to perform in the real world is impossible until we, obviously deploy them in the real world. So what we do is create like very, very robust hundreds, if not thousands of tests where we can run these agents against them and see how can we expect them to perform in the real world. If we throw the hardest, thorniest problems at them, if we try to jailbreak them, make them do bad things, are they going to behave as expected? And then it's a continuous monitoring process. We try to play a very tight role in that, making sure people are deploying models that are continuously monitored. But it is an ongoing security question, and it's how you deploy these systems at scale. You have to constantly make sure that they're updating, and you're constantly trying to break them so that they can improve themselves.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Any further questions? I know we've got some other folks teed up, but I want to maybe to get a question or two in. Mr. Reedman, kind of piggybacking a little bit on what my co-chair talked about in terms of just bias, inherent bias, and these algorithms and these LLMs, and is AI? I mean, does AI offer a solution to controlling for that bias, or is it actually an accelerant of that bias? Whatever it is, I know we want to think about it in the hot terms of what bias means, but in the very broad context, is it really going to help us with that issue to control it, or is it actually going to be an accelerant and make it worse?
Thanks for the question. I think it's a really hard problem to address specifically for a couple of reasons. Number one is with machine learning, broadly speaking, and this is prior to large language models, we're even thinking about neural networks as they've evolved in the past several decades. It's very hard to understand how these things work. In fact, many argue that it's an intractable problem just because of the amount of linear algebra and statistics that is under the hood of these things. We don't think in floats and integers as humans, we think in ideas and concepts and reasoning. So indeed, it's hard to understand what the biases are when they do appear, but when they appear, you know them, right? You can ask ChatGPT what its opinion about something, and usually it declines to answer, but sometimes it gives a very either I would say globally speaking, neoliberal response, right? Oh, I think people should be free rather than living under a tyranny, right? Which is a bias in a way, right? Bias towards values that I personally hold and Americans hold. But it all does kind of stem from this fact that these models are trained on text that we as humans write. So the entire corpus of human civilization, every piece of literature that's been written, every line of code that's been written, every article on Wikipedia, that's what it's learning from. And I think it's like that collective knowledge is actually the bias. So whatever you think that the collective opinion of every human that's ever written is, actually that's what the biases are. And we are seeing a lot of efforts towards kind of like fine-tuning these models on specific documents so that, again, for business use cases, they don't want to be political. They just want to extract data from a healthcare card, right? Or maybe you want something that's more factual and answering research questions, and you don't want it to be biased by political leanings. That's quite challenging, and that's where we introduce a lot of extra fine training and extra fine tuning to make sure that these models are kind of aligning with our incentives. And the incentives at the end of the day are benchmark driven. So I think that for bias specifically, we've seen a couple of benchmarks come out saying, oh, there seems to be liberal biases with a lot of large language model providers, but it's actually improving over time because we've become more aware of the benchmarks, and we're trying to address those as they're coming out.
Thank you, Mr. Lieb. The bias is the opinion of everyone who's ever lived. I like that. Um, you know, maybe one more quick one before we move on to Campbell. Obviously your expertise is much more, or certainly appears to be in the technical realm versus the legal, but you train your LLMs regardless of whatever the angle is on, all the data it can possibly get its hands on, right? And this is something that we've talked about extensively with DASA is the provenance of that data, and is it okay for you to train your LLM on my data, right? Maybe me personally, Cyrus Western, or just kind of in a broad sense of allowing that. I mean, are you aware of any conflicts that are currently unfolding, or is that something that you're worried about? Is data provenance and the quality of the data you can feed into your LLMs? And do you sense a fight over data provenance and LLM training?
So personally speaking, we don't encounter that very much ourselves, but our users do. So for two reasons. Number one is a lot of companies have proprietary data sets. And when you're sending a question over to ChatGPT, which is managed by OpenAI, unless you're on their enterprise plan, there's a good risk that they're going to be training on your data. It's like, at least it's very hard to say that they're training on your data. And people don't want that, especially when it comes to private records, customer banking data, customer healthcare data. We don't want that data to be in the hands of a model, right? I don't want, my health data to be part of the global record, so to speak. And that's actually where kind of a lot of the data users that we've seen are relying on open source models. So Meta, for example, created an open source model. It's very hefty, but you could probably download it on your laptop. In fact, on the smaller models, you can download them on your cell phone. It heats up your cell phone. It's not, the best, but it does work actually surprisingly well. And so I think that a lot of this is what we were kind of referring to is more on the training sides of things. And the question that a lot of our users are saying is like, I know my data is going to be sent to a provider who I have no control over. How can I make sure that data is not going to be trained on in the future? So as far as the initial data sets go, I think that a lot of the LLM providers have data licensing agreements or have taken unlicensed open source licensed data such as a Wikipedia, which allows you to kind of scrape this stuff. But there is an open question about if I have current data, how do I make sure the models aren't training on that? And that's where people are relying more on enterprise plans with LLM providers or using open source models.
Excellent. Well, Alex, I feel like just on you alone, we could probably go back and forth for hours and hours because this is, again, it's very stimulating stuff. One last chance. Any questions for Mr. Eden before we move on to the next person? Seeing none. Again, Mr. Eden, we really appreciate you setting aside some time. This is super helpful stuff. Daza, next up, I've got Campbell Hutchison. Is that correct, Daza, or who do we want to tee up next?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the committee, I think Campbell will be the perfect demo at this point in the testimony.
Okay. So Campbell, or Mr. Hutchinson, the way it works when you're testifying for these committees is just state your name, who you're with, and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. And we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Okay, awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So my name is Campbell Hutchison. I was previously, a little bit about myself, I was previously Chief Compliance Officer of Datto, which was a public unicorn in Norwalk, Connecticut. And I worked there for a number of years on issues like data privacy and other kinds of export controls, different kinds of technology regulation. And then recently I was Chief Product Officer of Norm AI, which was a company building agents in the regulatory vertical to help automate regulatory compliance. And that company recently did a large Series A. And I quit that company in order to sort of do research and explore more ideas around how the law and agents interact. What you're going to see is I'm here with Nam and Alex, who are the co-founders of Truth Systems. And you're going to see a sort of a demo we put together to explore ideas around how it is that lawyers can use AI agents in order to help comply with their professional conduct obligations, especially those created by AI systems. And so this was a project we did with Stanford Codex, and it was greatly inspired by Daz's work with the California Bar. And basically, you're going to see sort of two parts. The first part is a section around like how it works technically, and the second part is the demo. And we're going to split that up. So Alex is going to talk about how it works technically. Nam will talk about the demo. And if you have any other questions or whatever, I can answer them at the end or at any time.
Excellent. Please proceed.
Okay, cool. Alex, do you want to introduce yourself and jump in?
Sure. So my name is Alex Mack. I'm I'm one of the co-founders of Truth Systems. We work with Campbell and Stanford Codex pretty heavily on projects regarding trust and safety when it comes to interactions between generative AI and agents with law. Just a quick overview of what today's demo is going to be about. It's one of the ideas we've been exploring about how we can make lawyers and interactions with lawyers with law more safe and compliant. Essentially, we notice that a lot of lawyers are unaware about the limitations of this technology. And frankly, it's not in the job description of lawyers to understand how AI as a whole is compliant or uncompliant with certain ethical guidelines. And so our goal was to create an agent that helps lawyers interact with other generative AI systems in a way that preserves confidentiality, in a way that utilizes models and these agent systems to the best of their capabilities. And essentially what you'll see is two features that we'll show you today, just for the sake of time. We'll show you one, which is about how we can actually construct better prompts. This being, how can we make the instructions that lawyers give to generative systems better, more predictable, more high quality. But at the same time, how can we make those compliant with confidentiality guidelines that these lawyers have to abide by? So you'll see a quick demo here. And let's say I have a very, I'll zoom in a little bit. Let's say I have a very quick prompt about asking for incorporation of a business in the United States. This is a very vague general prompt. If I submit that, you'll see that our model identifies that, oh, United States, maybe we should be a little bit more specific. You know, incorporating in Delaware versus California has very vastly different implications. And then let's say we get the legal analysis behind this prompt. You'll see very quickly that we'll have a answer regarding what this prompt means in the business structure, in the how do the names, the article of incorporation. So this is essentially when you'll pass it on to, this is essentially how you'll pass it on to whatever generative system you use in the end. Let's say we have, let's say we start over. Let's say we have a little bit more of a question regarding a bank. Who is a bank? Let's say it's a large bank based in New York with revenue of approximately 50 billion yearly. They are looking to restructure. Fees. How should So this might be a type of prompt that a lawyer asks a generative systems just so that they have kind of bouncing ideas, getting a little bit more details regarding how they want to approach this, just listing as many options as they can. So let's say we have a national bank headquartered in the state of New York. We're not super sure. And then we ask it to say, optimize their legal expenses. If we run the scan, we'll see that it fails the scan because we have suspect of clients, of two specific clients, example ones that we've loaded in the system. And we suspect that this prompt is talking about JP Morgan and Goldman. In this case, a lawyer might say, oh, we know that these clients are not very happy with us using generative systems, or we know that they are very hesitant about confidentiality and PII issues, and we must be slightly more careful before we send this prompt over to any generative system. And so in this case, if the lawyer sees that it fails a PII scan, they might refer back to the client preferences regarding whether they allow them to use generative systems, regarding whether they allow them to have kind of riskier prompts, which might be identifiable based on the information put here. And you know, the information we put here right now in the example is very generic, but you can imagine lawyers might go into in-depth detail regarding information of a client that is not public, that might violate confidentiality. And so the next, I think Nam, you can talk a little bit about it.
So Alex, real quick, my apologies for interrupting. Just want to make sure. So the model can detect that there's a potential conflict of interest and it might be giving up its element of anonymity. Am I accurate in understanding that at its
Yes.
cognitive level in that
Yes.
matter? Wow, that's pretty impressive. Please continue.
Yeah, so hello everybody. I'm Nam Nguyen. I'm also a co-founder of Truth Systems. And yeah, I'd just love to talk a little bit about the context that putting into the context of the hard work that DAZA has put in for the ABA for ethical framework in Gen AI usage, one that prioritizes like responsible use of AI to uphold client confidentiality, as well as a lot of the conversation before that Alex was talking about, where implementing guardrails. We strive to define the role of agentic AI to be felt in the legal and compliance space as follow. One that can do automated compliance, mitigate risk in real time, and create traceable logs that is better for accountability. So whether that is streamlining compliance processes by automatically monitoring and interpreting regulatory changes, it can also like mitigate and detect this risk, as you see from Alex's demo earlier, where it might look at a potential client that is being mentioned that has not allowed for disclosure of information. And finally, these can create logs of interactions that can help us set up regulatory framework, as well as creating processes to track decisions, actions, and make it really easy to assign responsibilities and fix problems when needed. So I think on top of what Alex has spoken about, agents being able to really drive productivity and do really complicated tasks, we can also use agents as a way to uphold better risk management and strengthen accountability, all while operating within an ethical frameworks that safeguard against potential pitfalls when we're building these autonomous systems. So that's it. Thank you guys so much, and I'll yield it back to Campbell for any questions.
Campbell, please proceed.
Oh, nothing. We were just sort of letting, if you guys had any questions, we were just sort of opening up.
Committee members, any questions for Campbell or Mr. Co-Chairman, please.
Thank you. So from our perspective then, as lawmakers, do you see any best practices that we should be really looking for at this point to potentially implement through statute? Or is this something where we want to wait a little bit and see the direction things are going? It's clear that what you're advocating for is a good set of best practices that ends up protecting privacy, ends up protecting against conflict, and basically everything else. So you're carrying out the best practices while using the model. But do you see anything that requires actual regulation to implement, or is this going to be something where the market's going to take care of it?
I think
Mr.
that it's a
Hutchinson,
good.
go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you. I think that it's a good idea to take a look at sort of the work that the California Bar has done around best practices for using AI for lawyers. And I think that that's a good place where some pre-work has been done on trying to figure out what steps lawyers should take before they use generative AI to make sure they're using it in the best interest of their clients. I don't think any regulation needs to be done today, though, because I think what's sort of happening is there's going to be sort of a great experimentation, and you're going to see a lot of products come into existence that help lawyers sort of like manage their legal work and manage their legal obligations and whatnot. And it's probably something that you want to wait a year and a half before you directly regulate, or maybe 2 years, but you want to sort of keep apprised of what's going on in the market and keep apprised of what's going on in other states, because I think you're going to see a lot of experimentation.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
So the other day I had a conversation with one of the faculty here at the University of Wyoming about the idea of training an LLM as effectively an oracle for the state of Wyoming, for the public of Wyoming to ask legal questions, we'll say, and then obviously you'd want to be putting some disclaimers and making sure that it wasn't legal advice, but giving it access to all of the statutes, but also all of the rules and regulations of the state, all of the ordinances of the cities, towns, and counties, and even potentially engage with case law. So the case law is there. So you have this Oracle that would really, really know the legal scene of the state of Wyoming better than any individual. It seems incredibly plausible, but what guidance would you have? Well, first of all, I'll say, do you know of any projects along those lines elsewhere? Is anybody else working on anything like that? It sounds like this is right up your alley. And second of all, what would you immediately be thinking about that would need to go into something like that from the protecting the consumer and recognizing the limitations of such a model?
Mr. Hutchinson, please go ahead.
Sure. So the city of New York, I believe, is doing something fairly similar to this. I don't know if it's over like all of their regulation or just over a subset of their regulation. What I would say is that at this point, the difficulty is that the answers that you're going to get out are going to be suboptimal without a lot of tuning. I think this is something that every state is going to have to implement, and I think it's incredibly important because I think that like one of the powers that LLMs offer us is the ability for people to understand what services the government has, what regulation affects them, and to be able to do that without the benefit of without having to turn to a lawyer and pay $500 an hour for every little thing. So I think that this is really important and needs to be done, but I think that managing the quality around it is difficult, and something that you can do to sort of help manage that is to pick a particular like area first to focus on, and then it's easier to make sure that you get the quality right. And yeah, so that's what I would say. I would say start small and then expand. The model capabilities are going to get way better. You're just going to have tremendous uplift there. So in like 2 to 3 years, this will be way easier than it is today. But I think it's completely the right direction.
Well, Mr. Co-Chairman.
No, I'd say excellent. I didn't know if either of the two colleagues had anything to add, but that's an appreciated answer. I think certainly starting off and building this piece by piece would certainly be the way to do it. Appreciate that.
So, Mr. Hutchinson, and maybe I don't know if this is also for Alex or for Nam, but the demo you guys gave was, you're trying to structure or figure out your fee structure, and your client is obviously a large New York bank. Do you think that this LLM now has the capability to give policy prescriptions for lawmakers like us? Because I think, one of the things certainly when we're crafting legislation is what are we solving for, right? What is the problem? What are our options to solve it? So do you think that this model has that capability where it's assuming obviously you're giving really high quality prompts of the policy of the problems you're trying to solve, can it give pretty detailed and intelligent policy prescriptions? And if not, how far away are we from that capability, would you say?
Alex and Nam, do you guys want to take this one?
I think we experimented with something pretty similar before, and the conclusion we came up with was that it's about the level of an undergraduate in college, right? It can compile a lot of grunt work for you. It can compile a lot of research for you, but to make the policy prescriptions themselves, it's a little far away from that still. I think the best usage for a lawmaker like yourself, the best usage would be using it to speed up the context gathering, to speed up all the background information you need behind the policy, and to speed up the research process behind getting all this information condensed together. But it still struggles at effectively applying reasoning and logic and understanding the context when applying those prescriptions to make policies that are actually effective. So I do think that there is a huge, tremendous value in the context and research process, but I think we're still pretty far away from actually generating the policies themselves.
Yeah, I'd like to echo some of those.
Yeah, please, Mr. Riedman, if you want to hop in and chime in, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that was just said. I think that the general way of thinking about these models in general you have two main levers. So you have the model itself. So the model itself is created by somebody training on hundreds of GPUs with millions, trillions of tokens of text, and it's able to create internal reasoning based on top of that. So for example, ChatGPT, OpenAI just launched a new model last week called the O1. And what it's capable of doing is actually create steps of reasoning to think about how to solve problems. So that's one aspect of it, which is the underlying model powerful enough to solve this problem? The second is the information gathering. So when you train a model, it's saved at a point in time. So O1, I think, was finished training sometime a few months ago. So it only has model knowledge up until that point. It doesn't know the current state of things, at which point it's going to need to gather external context to understand how the world works. And obviously, there's going to be data that the model never had, which was private for whatever reason that it was not trained on. So those two aspects that are what makes it a model essentially powerful. And in terms of replacing a policy or a regulator, it's really hard to say. I'm not sure that we want to strip ourselves of that agency just yet, mostly because, well, not to be too facetious here, but we as humans, right? We don't pass the best legislation ourselves. So why do we think an AI is going to do a better job than what we can do? Essentially, when it's trained to follow our examples. So if it's following bad examples, I think the AI will probably do no better. So it's really up for us to improve. We can use the tools to gather better context and make our lives easier, but I would not use it as a replacement.
Mr. Cohen, what co-chairman, what I took away from that is that we still have jobs.
Still have jobs. That's right. Keep us for a little while longer.
Um,
I think Nam wanted to say something too. It looked like he.
Yeah, please. Now, if you wanted to chime in, go ahead.
Oh no, I think that's mainly the thing. And honestly, it's what we've advocated ourselves as well, is that yes, it's the model's very much far away from like taking people's job. And it's even more important that we place processes and best practices, whether that is like a framework or guardrails. That is going to be the most important thing when it comes to implementations and usage of AI. I don't think people's job are going away soon. I don't think high level thinking is going away soon. It's really about how we use these tools and how we design the ecosystem for these tools responsibly that can best leverage its capabilities. I think that's the most important thing.
So, and this is kind of a broad question, whether it's for Mr. Riedman or Mr. Hutchinson or whoever. If I heard that correctly, you said we're at about an undergraduate level in terms of cognition to think about these things in the big picture, right? I mean, and you said, well, it's kind of limited by the fact that they're a reflection of the humans who program these LLMs and AI, so they're never going to be able to perform at a cognitive level at the same level. But is it reasonable to assume that eventually we will get to a point where, as long as you have the quality prompts into these models, that you'll be able to get pretty sophisticated responses back when you're trying to make policy prescriptions and solve issues? Is that a reasonable assumption?
I think it is. And I think that not only is it a reasonable assumption, but the models are just going to get more and more powerful. GPT-4 was a step up on GPT 3.5. GPT-4o1 is a step up on GPT-4. Like, the model capabilities are just going to get better and better. And so if right now it's an undergraduate level, then in 2 to 3 years, it might be a graduate level. Like, I think that it's dangerous to underestimate the increasing capabilities. And basically, whatever you have now, it's just going to get better, and it will certainly be able to help you make policy prescriptions as it gets better. You'll always have to check the edge cases, but the models will get better.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that point, which
Maybe-
actually I would argue that perhaps,
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's a bit of delay. I would say that it's actually able to answer a number of perhaps graduate level question exams. So there was a famous economist who ran some of his intro to graduate economics course exam questions on that, and he said it's an A-. It's quite good at answering these sorts of questions. It's good at managing trade-offs. It's good at understanding policy prescriptions. But ultimately, the way that we want to think about this as these are our tools. So it's able to do the research for us, but it's up for us to check the homework. And it's going to be doing so at a more effective rate. But I doubt it's going to go out of control. And I'd actually probably invite you just, try it out yourselves. ChatGPT is the price of lunch. It's $20 a month. And you can really kind of, upload a proposal and see for yourself how effective it is. And it might be very helpful for guiding instructions. But I would not forfeit control. That's kind of my prescription.
Mr. Riedman, no doubt, but I'm going to go ahead and hazard to guess your prompts into GPT will probably be better than mine. My question is, I'm sorry, Ms. Co-Chair, I said I have one follow-up because I'm trying to think through this. In the legislature, we have a saying, you can't legislate morality. right? Because it's such a highly subjective topic. Do you think that, or to what extent will your model or any of these models be able to grasp the concept of subjectivity and and giving ideas and answers and policy prescriptions? How comprehensive is it now? And do you think it'll ever get to the point where we can, grasp the concept of subjectivity as humans?
Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I pop in at this point?
Sure. Yeah. Des, please go ahead.
Thanks. I just want to add another layer to the excellent testimony of my peers, which I agree with. And I think your question is a really good segue to this additional layer, which is that this technology, and by that I mean the foundation in what's known as the frontier models. So like the most powerful models, GPT 401 that was just mentioned, Sonnet 3.5 from Anthropic, Google's Gemini 1.5 Pro, the experimental ones, and so forth. They actually are unusually good at some of the softer reasoning and what would be thought processes, more so than they are at things that we always thought computers are good at, such as calculations. It's because the nature of the model is different. It literally, the process that they do is called inference, and that there's a good reason for that, as it sees these patterns, deep in the sort of semantics and the conceptual layer of all of the corpus of its training data and all of the ways that it was pre-processed. I have found, and there is research that shows, it can be quite good at identifying moral aspects, ethical aspects, sort of potential liability, things that could come back later and cause issues. Partly because these things have happened again and again and again over the wheel of time, and it's reflected and supported in the training set and in the connections that it makes in high dimensional vector space. So it actually has some surprising and deep capabilities that can be very useful along these lines. And my take on it is, while I agree with my colleagues, not to abrogate your duties or your job anytime soon, or probably ever, for real reasons of just my sense of the role of humans. I actually think I would suggest somewhat a different vantage point, which is that if I were back in a legislature, as I was in my younger days, I would not miss the chance to leverage this technology for every single phase of the lawmaking process, from helping to come up with questions for the witnesses, helping to look at potential different options for legislative treatment, analyzing deeply, the different provisions of given bills, their interaction with each other and with other laws. Political questions, it's quite good at. I'm working on a couple campaigns now, and it's really, really good. As has been mentioned, so much, almost everything is dependent on exactly how you phrase the prompt. The more expert you are and the more knowledgeable and competent you are in your system, the better you can frame that prompt. And the other most important thing is to feed it additional data, like the rest of your docket, what your priorities are for the select committee this year, what else is going to hit, all the same stuff that you would tell somebody else that you're asking to help you on any of these matters, you would feed into the context window, it's called, as additional data. But with those provisos, I think these are very, very capable now. And what makes it, and the reason for putting this panel together today is all of the answers that have been given so far in the legislative context impliedly assume a person and a model through a chat window, maybe enriching it with some more data, which is fine, and you should do that. But what we're talking about today is agentic systems. And as Alex showed, these agentic systems, and as I'll show in a moment in my remarks, when you start sort of stacking teams of these agents that can look at the same question from different perspectives, and then maybe have additional instructions and have additional data, and that can collaborate with each other, I think that's the power move that elevates its capabilities well above what an undergraduate can do, and puts it into a domain expert level of quality and competence. And so I just want to sort of mention a little different, somewhat of a different kind of center of gravity in my remarks is it's not 2 or 3 years, I don't think, for these to be very capable and usable for your purpose and so many others in the society and the economy. I think it's today, and the trick is using them well and unleashing the height of their capability with agentic systems.
Thank you, Daza. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Daza, I've been using all the various builds for a few years now and trying to use them more and more for legislating and asking. We've talked through some of these questions, Daza, on trying to ask very complicated questions, see what type of response and what utility there is, and as well as having, GPT 4.0 draft legislation. I haven't done 401 yet to draft legislation, and it might do better because one of the problems it's had typically in the past, which an agentic system will take care of, is it's almost like it gets exhausted. It only wants to give you so much. So if you ask a very specific, narrow question, you'll get a great answer and you'll get a perfect paragraph, and that could go into a bill draft. But if you say, all right, I want to draft a bill on this that does these 5 things, it ends up being very superficial. So we're getting to the phase now, based on the testimony today, that rather than it being superficial because you've asked it a more complex problem and it gives you more of an outline, it sounds like now we're getting to the point where rather than doing that, it will first ask itself the question, develop the outline, and then start to fill in the outline with robust content. So even with 01, where it's trying to logic out pathways, perhaps it can already do a better job. And as I said, I haven't tried drafting a full bill with 01 to see what it comes up with, but that might be a good next step, Mr. Chairman, is to kind of see where that's at. As far as kind of where it goes from here, though, when we think about these complex tasks, one of the things that I've noticed is it's incredibly skilled at operating inside a sandbox. And you said inference, it makes good sense, right? It tends to interpolate seemingly and come up with interpolated solutions. But whenever I've asked for something which would require some type of intuitive leap outside of the sandbox where it's making up new knowledge, it doesn't do that very well. Is that something that we can expect to change and evolve? Is that something that is being worked on where those intuitive leaps will strengthen over the next few years? Or is that a necessary challenge of the underlying structure of the technology where it really is inference based and interpolating more than extrapolating? And I don't know who wants to answer that. So I think just about anybody
I think any of us could,
there
but
can answer that.
Yeah, that's
Mr.
open answer, Daza, or?
Yes,
Kim?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, and I actually go into this directly in some remarks that I put together. I wanted to make sure my colleagues could go first, just in case we ran out of time. But is there time for me to go through a few slides? And the punchline of the slide is we're not waiting 2 or 3 years for that. I can show you how it's happening today.
Awesome.
Daza, please proceed.
Thank you so much. And I will go through the ritual of saying, can you see my slides?
You are good to go.
Great. Agentic AI obviously has some, I'm more like the person on the right. I see a lot of promise. There are perils as well, and we've gone through some of them today. Just by way of background, I first started getting into agentic AI in 1997 when the drafting had begun in some states for what became the Electronic Transactions Act. This is a memo here from the ABA committee, which I was on, that was helping with that draft on the electronic agents provisions. And only now are we finally at the point where we can we're finally starting to get to the point where these agentic systems can operate autonomously. In 2011, I worked with the law firm known as Robot and Wang to create a prototype of a corporation in Delaware that was completely autonomous. At MIT, we tried to create an automated credit union, federally chartered credit union. We got a certain distance there. We've done things with automated legal entities over the years. Always the technology wasn't good enough for some of these things yet. I think it is today. And personally, I've taken a step back from a full legal entity and just been working on individual projects and seeing how far they can go through the life cycle of a project. I don't believe Alex Riebman showed this, but he shared with me a slide deck that has 450 startups and products and services and open source projects that are good examples of agents. We can share this link with you as well. This is just to show that while it's still relatively new in the sort of general zeitgeist, agentic systems are here now that are leveraging and extending the capabilities of generative AI, and people are beginning to use them for transactions and for matters that have legal import. And there already have been some issues. You may have heard over the Christmas break about the chat system that was that a car dealer had put online to help people with their getting in understanding what the cars were and starting to look at what the pricing would be. And somebody was able to jailbreak that and convince it to sell a new Chevy Tahoe for $1. This could be a problem. Air Canada had a chat bot that materially misrepresented its refund policy. The consumer took them to court, and the judge made it crystal clear that when you use these agentic systems in this case customer service context, that you the companies doing that are responsible for the outputs of those systems. So I think it's timely, and there's two big tectonic things happening beyond the power of the underlying models, and it's what's known as the context window and these agentic workflows. The context window is how much data you can put in to the system what in a given session. That's profound, but we'll focus today just on the agent part, although these things are connected. OpenAI has been working on agentic systems for some time. I think we'll see a lot more explicit output from them through the rest of this year and early 2025. In their paper that they put out at the end of last year, when they were sort of clearing their throat to get involved in this, they defined this next one. They defined agentic systems as unlike, say, using it in a chat context or a different context. They can deal with complexity of your goal as well as the external environment. They can adapt to that, and they can independently execute an action to meet that goal with limited, or in some cases with no human review or approval. Two of the big areas of application are doing project work, as part of your job or life management, and also transactions. With projects, people haven't mentioned this very explicitly, but let me just say, I think the heavyweight champion for agentic systems right now is software engineering. A lot of software can now be engineered almost completely, or in narrow cases completely, through agent-based systems. Devin was the first widely recognized software engineering system to allow a user to put a goal in, and then it would create, I don't know if you can see the screen on the right, but it sort of spawns a crew of agents that do different aspects of the software project. And it may ask for some guidance a little bit from time to time from the user, but it turns out working software at the end. Now there's a renaissance of this type of software happening now. Replit is a big platform to help with software engineering. It will create the entire front end of systems in minutes and deploy it onto the web for you based on a few prompts. Cursor may have been mentioned. That's another one. There's quite a few. And Campbell mentioned applications in the legal and regulatory space when he said he had been product lead at Norm.ai. Norm.ai is applying the same kind of method, but not to software engineering, but rather to regulatory compliance. And they have just finished a very successful Series A and are working in a number of regulated industries. Spellbook, we almost was able to do a demo today. I'll just say a few words about what they launched a few days ago. They call it Associate. This is for law firms. And this agentic system does the work of roughly a junior or early mid-level associate at a medium or large law firm. It will create a plan based on the user prompt. It has access to the law firm's knowledge bank and relevant client information. It will go through and start and create agents to do each part of the plan. So getting back to Senator Rothfuss's observation a moment ago about his early work trying to do bills and how it kind of gets tired after the first few paragraphs and starts to drift a little bit. This happens partly because of the context window and the session limitations. But when each agent you spawn is looking at one part of the problem and it's being orchestrated by another agent, you always get the highest quality, best work on the little part that they do. That's partly how Spellbook works. And then it puts it all back together. They also have a cool design pattern that I use in my systems, which is after they put it together, they look back at the plan and say, not only did this do the plan right, but did we have the right plan to start with to meet the goal for the client? And they may change the plan a little bit if their internal evaluation says it wasn't good enough, and then go through and run the whole process again with an improved plan. Really interesting stuff. So these hybrid teams of agents is something I want the committee to be aware of. Agentic systems, when you start having each individual agent within a context loaded up with context and basically expertise and instructions through the prompts to look at things from a certain angle and to focus on a certain aspect of it, you can make a huge progress that wouldn't be available with one agent alone, and certainly not with one person prompting through their limited context capability, limited context window. So if you have a legal agent and a technical agent working together, for example, on software, the software could end up being more compliant. One of the agents could create the terms and conditions for your app, could look at other legal arrangements or partnerships you have, can really deepen the output of the agents. Similarly, a lot of the work now is happening with so-called business-oriented agents, financial, marketing, et cetera, et cetera. You put those together with legal agents, very deep. Business, legal, and technical agents operating in teams, incredibly powerful to go from a little prompt to a really good deliverable at the end that your team can work with and start getting to something that you can deploy very, very quickly and may in fact be better than what you might have come up with on your own. The demo that I showed you, Chairman Rothfuss and Chairman Western a little earlier that I call Agento is just such a system that uses business, legal, and technical agents to come up with a plan, break it down into smaller parts, work on the different domains of the plan, and then kind of put it all back together into a single deliverable. I think there's a lot of promise in this approach. And now to Chairman Rothfuss's most immediate question, which is, what about novel ideas? Can it go beyond what we already have and just be completely derivative? I think the answer is yes. I think we can say that now for sure. And let me just look at a different domain, which is science. Scientists and scientific researchers have been using this technology as part of their own work. Back in 2023, it was shown that these models can create, equal or better introductions to papers than humans, and they kind of double-blind tested that. And in the months ever since, there's been a lot of studies that have shown that these systems can do whole parts of the scientific process very, very well when you tune them just right to do so. And that one on the bottom from September 6th of this year, can LLMs generate novel research ideas? The answer is yes. I mean, they have a question mark there, but the answer is yes, it can generate novel research ideas. And this is the one I would most encourage you to look at. It's called AI Scientist. It dropped a few weeks ago. It's completely open source. And this research lab in Japan basically put the entire life cycle of a typical scientific research project together, from ideation, generating new ideas, checking them, going to different papers to see if it's novel or not. Then it pushes it to the next kind of phase there, which is it can devise an experiment, sort of like a software engineer, synthesize data if needed, or go and fetch the correct data to run the experiment, get the results of the experiment, do some kind of data plots and graphs, see what's novel, and then go right to manuscript writing from the results of what it discovered, publish the manuscript. And so this is pretty incredible. I will be the first to admit, having implemented this, a lot of the ideas it comes up with aren't that great. What's fascinating is some of the ideas it comes up with every run are novel ideas, and it can then go through the entire life cycle. Now, just imagine for the moment, not long in the future, when this life cycle is for legislation to assist in the legislative process, or when it's for new product ideation and right down through deployment, and every other part of the economy and society. I believe we're there now. And one critical part of that is when these things are empowered to actually conduct a transaction at the end, like to deploy the app or to purchase the good or sell the service or what have you. This is much dicier. However, there are systems now that are already purchase agents are quite common, shopping bots to go and find the best price on a given product or service, and then to give them some money, like a debit, a value card, or even a credit card with limits, and to for consumers and for procurement, this can be very, very efficient. The best practice is obviously at this point, don't let it conduct the transaction. I'll put that right out there, like have the human click the final button. But people are giving it this kind of agency or this type of authorization, and it's working pretty well. And we're also now able to identify flaws and problems and unexpected outcomes that give us the ability to focus more on how to fix the code. And the code isn't just technical, it's also legal. So this new research at Stanford Law School and Codex is something I've been leading, where we're looking at legal frameworks like eSign, UITA, other parts of contract law, and seeing whether we can design better transactional agentic systems that avail themselves of the electronic signature, automated transactions, the error and mistake provisions that benefit people with security procedures and so forth. Also, the electronic agent provisions to support and reflect these rules to get more predictable legal outcomes when people use this technology to conduct transactions, which they're doing. The most recent way people talk about agentic AI for transactions is they call it a large action model, or words to that effect. That's been that was sort of, there was an initial hype around that about it 9 months ago, and that sort of settled down a little bit when people saw that the technology was still a little bit buggy, but it's coming up again now in a more modest, more narrowly focused way. And these are some of the types of, I guess I'd say, actions and interactions and some transactions that agents are commonly put to. If you go through that 450 company and product list that Alex put together on the spreadsheet that I showed earlier, we could add a column to sort of say which ones of these interactions or transactions are each one of those doing. And so just in closing, I'll say that the Codex research, we probably need another couple of weeks. This is how we're coming at it. But just to give you a look over the horizon, which I hope will be helpful as you consider the possible benefit of legislative treatment eventually for this burgeoning area. Starting with Uniform Electronic Transactions Act is really good. It might already cover the edge cases that have been identified so far. I think there is probably still some gray in there. And these are the 4 categories that we may change or improve this. I hope we will, but that's seen clear so far. Consent and delegation of authority by the human to the agent is one area where, when it's not done right, weird, bad things can happen. When it's done right, very good, efficient things can happen. So having better UX for agents and much better logging of what the consent and delegation was is critical. Attribution is also handled in UEDA, but people don't always know whether they're dealing with an agent of another party or that party themselves. So making sure that the legal party who's using the agent's identified, that the two third parties that they're interacting on behalf of, is critical for accountability and for everything to go well. You know who you're contracting with. Apparent authority can be a problem. You're dealing with an agent. I don't know, can it buy $700 of goods for me, or is it only authorized to buy $500? So communicating the actual authority in some way could be helpful, or at least communicating limits. And errors and mistakes. What happens, not if, but when errors and mistakes happen. And in that case, I think the most important thing is for parties to have contracts with each other. And to the extent those contracts are automated, all the better. Google already has an attribution field in their API for Gemini. This attribution field is made primarily for the provenance of data. Because there's a lot of demand for that, as Chairman Western, I think, reflected in his comments. However, it can be used for some of the data is who is the party I'm transacting with. So we could leverage existing fields of APIs to handle some of the things that are needed legally. There's a lot of great best practices already for consent and authorization. A big accept button, making it clear and conspicuous what people are doing. There's a lot of good workflows for authorization that we can just apply to agents, but which are not always happening right now with agentic systems. That's forgivable. It's a new technology, but they should happen. And then finally, when it comes to agreements, making people negotiate an agreement is very inefficient, especially when we want more automated processes. Having existing kind of machine readable agreements that they can choose from is a promising possible approach. Creative Commons is a good example. LLMS.text could be a way to do that. And then there's other more complex things like IEEE, a major international standards organization, now has a specification for machine readable privacy policies. That could be slightly tweaked for machine readable terms and conditions, or agent terms when you're using an agent to do an automated transaction with my system. Bond terms is another good example of standard agreements with a pull-down menu that you can refer to in your deal. And so finally, this isn't just for companies. Although individuals, maybe myself excluded, don't typically use agentic systems to do their kind of personal, household, and family and consumer transactions. That is another thing that's coming online. You'll see over the next couple months a number of blog posts from Consumer Reports Innovation Lab on personal agents that can unleash the power of this technology for individuals and consumers, and can help even the playing field in what should be an open and a fair market. And so for anyone that's interested to contribute to any of the work that I just mentioned, in particular, if you want to look at the Stanford agentic stuff, if you go to computationallaw.org, we've got a little form here, and you just kind of click, I'd like to see your research, and I'm willing to give you some feedback on it. That would be very grateful. That's my little plug there for feedback. With that, I just want to thank you very much for your time, and to say I'd be happy to take any questions. But the main thing is, I think agents are a now thing. I don't think it's a thing that's going to be happening in a year or two. It's already happening in the economy right now. It is not widely used yet, so there's still time to consider how are they being used, what are the implications. But I would encourage the committee to get your hands on agent systems, learn about them, talk to constituents who are using them now, and kind of get ahead of what's imminently about to be potentially a need for a little further clarity legislatively. Thank you.
Thank you, Daza. I mean, you covered a lot of ground there, but I think it was really good stuff for the committee and for those watching. I'm certainly bummed that I wasn't the one that tricked GM into selling me $100,000 car for a buck. Daza, was that you?
I wish it was.
Committee, any questions? Mr. Co-Chairman, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have one question about you just hit on personal agents a moment ago, and one of the challenges with personal agents, probably several, but one is the coupling the privacy concerns with the continuity of the agent, so that you've got to have some place to privately store your agent in a way where you can continue to interact with it over a long period of time, but others can't necessarily glean what it is that you're up to. So you've got a challenge that I don't believe has really been addressed by any of the major actors at this point in time, because they tend to be storing things server side on their own, or you need to have your own enterprise edition. The quick question is there anybody out there that is ahead on this personal agent concept, where you can have that continuity and the privacy at the same time?
Daza?
Yes, thank you. And I would just say there's two things. Number one, there's a number of open source models that may not be as powerful, are not as powerful as GPT-4o1, but that are very serviceable, especially when you prompt them well. And the open source models that are small enough to fit on a phone or on your laptop are things that absolutely can be used for personal AI. The person there's a few people working on this. The one who I admire and respect the most and would commend to you to talk to, or to look at how they're looking at it. Their name is Doc Searles, and his wife Joyce have been for the last couple of years working on personal agents. And you'll see some demos of their approach for a consumer first agent in the blog posts that I mentioned are coming out soon from Consumer Reports Innovation Lab. And so there are people beginning to look at this. The approach to not sharing the data with third parties and to keeping it private and secure for individuals, the clean room approach is to don't use their models. If it's not running on your system, you may not own it. There's a balance there, and I like to use the most powerful models, and I'll take the risk, and the terms and conditions offer some protection, but the clean approach is run the models yourself. And places like Consumer Reports Innovation Lab and others are working to make that simple for consumers to be able to do by downloading an app.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
No, good.
Well, and Daza, kind of along the same lines, it's about privacy, these agents that you may use for whatever the intended use may be. What my understanding is that OpenAI allows you to keep all your input data. My question is, do you believe that? I maybe that's just me being a little tinfoil hatty here, but I feel I've been really burned by the Facebook, Instagram, where they get to keep all your photos, right? I mean, it's your photo, but they get to keep it too. And so I don't know, maybe it's just me being a little suspicious, but I guess I'm asking you to opine on kind of a gray area here. But do you see that data ownership, all the input data and output data, where do you see that going in the future as this technology evolves?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share your reticence about sharing very sensitive data with these companies that may have other priorities today, and who knows what their positions will be tomorrow, or when they're acquired or go bankrupt. What will happen to all that data? So these questions don't go away in this new context. We've had them in the past. You mentioned Facebook is a great example, and that's not the only example. Having said that, I'm testifying on my own behalf here, but my personal view is that's a deal I've mostly been willing to take because of the amazing capabilities of the technology. There's some risk involved, and I don't share extremely sensitive stuff, but I'm willing to take some risk, partly by reading their terms and conditions and what their current promises are. Also, there's in the terms and conditions, you'll see like in OpenAI, for example, if you pay the $20 a month, what part of the deal you get is they claim that they won't train their models on your data. So there is some respite there. I run open source models to do the most sensitive kind of client stuff, or if I'm not permitted for under contract or something, or my own common sense to risk having someone else see data, but I still want a little help. I've got open source models for that. I think this could be one area where legislation could be useful. I'm not certain that state by state's the right way to do it, but having some really clear ways that a consumer can know under these conditions, my data is completely safe. Under those conditions, it may be shared. Maybe that changes the price of it or something like that. Could be really useful. It is right now a little foggy to most people what will or won't happen with your data when you use the systems. And so I really appreciate the caution that you reflected in your question, Mr. Chairman. I share the caution, and yet I want the benefit. And so in my case, I frequently will take some risk in sharing the data to get the outcome I want.
You're a brave man, Daza, braver than I. Any further questions, committee, for Daza or for anybody else? I really appreciate, again, was there anything else also in the demonstration that you wanted to touch on, Daza, or any other further remarks?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I'd say is for reasons of time, I didn't go through the live demo of the Agento system, but I will say this, the hypothetical goal that you both, Chairman Rothfuss and Co-Chairman Western provided to see how the agentic system would work on a conundrum that you'd been working on with tax credits for energy generation and constitutional and other questions around that. I did run that query, and I'll share the outputs with you, but I think there's a lot to learn from throwing a curveball kind of questions like that. I assure you it wasn't designed for that specific question, but it did break up it created a plan, it broke it up into small tasks, and it kind of looked at the energy distribution market. It looked at the constitutional questions. It looked at different alternatives for how you could structure legislation and put it all together again in a report at the end. So I guess the last thing I'd say is just to close the loop on that. I could say, although we'd hung up by the time it was done processing, it did complete that task. And I think that I'll be happy to share that with you. It wasn't anything you would take and rely upon for your legislation, but I think it does show that these things can be useful. They can be an aid in your process. And if it had access to more information about your energy market and the rest of Wyoming law and the specific case law constitutionally on interstate commerce that you could trip up with the approach that you had with credits and so forth, it can do even better. Thank you.
Mr. Co-Chairman?
Thanks, Mr. Co-Chairman. Yeah, that's great. And I certainly would like to see that and read through that. I appreciate you finishing up that exercise. And Mr. Co-Chairman, I appreciate this presentation today. This is exceptional, and it really gives us insight into the next generation of what we're going to be able to do with AI. And it looks like we're already beginning that next generation. And there's incredible capacity out there that not too many people know about, but it's beginning to be where the state of play in AI is. So we need to know that. We appreciate you organizing these exceptional speakers today and presenting that to us. So once again, thank you for helping us to understand the cutting edge state of affairs.
Yeah, Des, I really appreciate, and the select committee really appreciates your time and all the effort you put into putting this panelist together, give us this demo. I mean, I think this is the kind of stuff that again, whether we take any action, this is the kind of regulation or the kind of discussion that leads to good regulation. So we really appreciate you teeing all this up. Committee, any further questions for Daza? I know we kind of did some shuffling of our agenda there. We still have an important issue pending before the select committee, but want to make sure there's any further questions. And I'm not seeing any. So again, Daza, really appreciate your time, and please do stick around.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee. It's been an honor.